All right. So while we're waiting for people to get through the commercials and come on in, I got to play a little tune that we called Starlight Dreaming. I composed this last year. Yeah, here we go. Well, hello there, good people. Good evening. It's Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. You know what that means. It's time for yet another live stream. Let me put this thing away here. Ooh, and did you see the invisible plant? I've got a solo cup over here with an invisible plant. That's right. Only I can see it. This is just a little it's only showing up green because of the green screen there and the fact that that's green foliage that's being shown. That's a little it's a little brandywine tomato. We've got 39 of these growing in the back room right now. So let's say hello to everybody. Hi, saw Sassafras Red and Kimber in early. There's Vicky, Mary, Moon Sprouts is in. Oh, by the way, everybody, for those that weren't tuned in last week, we have a contest going on. $100 gift certificate for Amazon's on the line for whoever can grow the most sunflowers during this year's growing season. If you live down far south and have 2 growing seasons, you're only allowed to grow 1 set of sunflowers, though, not 2. It wouldn't be fair. Moon Sprout's already gotten her seeds. My neighbor across the street's gotten his seeds. I've got a 25-pound bag of them right here, so I'm not going to give up this $100 without a fight myself, mind you. Carolyn Smith's Food Forest and Homestead is in the house. Hi, Carolyn. Hiya. Lots of good people in the house today. We've got Vicky with us, of course. Watching for signs of watercress greening up, she says, but not seeing it yet. Well, it'll happen. It should anyway. Stray Kitten is with us, and Kimber and Mary is all in the house. Are all in the house tonight. Good evening, everybody. All right. So as you can see from the banner running across the bottom of the screen, we have today's show notes available to us on www.greencountryagroforestry.com/blog. And I've got a shared screen here that I can bring up to show you what we're talking about. Of course, this is our blog post. Has that same backdrop. And of course, you may have seen a poll going on there. Let me take a look. See, is that poll showing? No, I don't see a poll. Hang on a second. Let me put I had the sound going there. Let me see. I've got a poll to ask you about that thumbnail picture that you saw, and of course, it's the one that's behind me right now. And the question is, of course, are those bulbs edible or are they poisonous? If you think they're poisonous, click on yes. If you think they're edible, click on no. And let's see what you guys guess. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this down here because I don't need to be having that on the screen. I'll just read off as we go here, as a matter of fact. So this is our blog that we put together earlier today. And I've got a set of bulbs shown in that first picture. If you look down there, it goes ahead and starts, from the tropical areas, 23 degrees, 27 minutes north on down to 23 degrees and 27 minutes south. That section of the world, you don't really have to worry about where your next meal is going to come from. There's always something growing. Food is easy to grow. Lots of calories are easy to come by, relatively speaking, compared to, say, these temperate zones, and especially cooler temperate zones when we move further and further north or further and further south. There we have this thing that I like to call winter. And that means that you've got to be ready to take some extra steps to make sure you've got food on hand to eat during these months where you can't just go walk out, reach up your hand and pick something off of a tree and eat it. Typically, we would use food preservation techniques to store some food items, stuff like dehydrating, fermenting. That's the new one. Fermenting and pickling. But here in the modern age, we've added canning, vacuum sealing, and freezing to all of that as well. My preferred method, since you probably know this because you've followed for a while, but if you're new, you know that my personal preferred method for storing food over the months is that's difficult to grow, is to look for things that are edible that can be preserved without refrigeration. So things like your flower corn, things like squash, winter squash, lots of root vegetables, beans, peas, things like that they can store that ordinarily wouldn't require a lot of extra work to preserve. Because in the back of my mind is going on, maybe one of these days we're going to have an event that's causing the power grid to fail. Maybe the trucks won't run. We won't be able to get fuel for things. It's possible that we won't be able to resupply certain things. And I'd like to have a food system in place that I can fall back on that isn't dependent upon all of that, because I have no idea whether we're going to have some major catastrophe or not. But if I'm going to be prepared, it would make sense for me to have a food system in place that isn't necessarily dependent upon having a functioning grid, a functioning supply network even. I'm going to have the food that I need to eat on my property already, and it will be growing here. And not only will it be growing here, but it's probably more than I can eat, so I can afford to part with some of it to people who need it also, which kind of is what I'm doing right now, just sort of ahead of the crisis. I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to set themselves up to not have to worry about where the next meal is coming from. Anyway, I digress. Where was that? Off on a tangent. The second picture, if you're following along, shows another set of bulbs. So we have two sets of bulbs in those first two pictures. And I want you to pay attention to those, because one of those is toxic and the other is not. Of course, one of those is also being shown in that poll that you guys can be looking at right now. So let me take a look and see how that poll is doing. Yes is at 50%. Wow. 50-50. That's not actually, that's not that unusual. Before we got started, I showed that to a few people, including a few people that are professional foragers that should know what they're looking at, and comparing those two different pictures. So, okay, which one is the edible one and which one is poisonous, will make you sick? And they weren't able to get it right either, about 50-50 at the time, just by looking. All right. Kimber, no, don't give them hints. Kimber was, I told Kimber which was which earlier. All right. Vicky says, I read the entire blog earlier, didn't know I was on the email list. If you signed up for notifications on the website, then you get notified whenever I update the blog. I know I haven't really put in a lot of posts this past year because I've been goofing off. Figured I'd better get back to it. All right. Moose Breast, I guess yes, because I don't know. Let's see. Carolyn can't do winter. Yeah. You live nice and far south, though. Worm Sprout says, I want to learn lacto fermentation. I don't know if I've got one on a video on lacto fermentation, but I will attempt to do one by the end of this year. I will preserve some okra, most likely, which is my favorite thing to lacto ferment. You can make a nice 3% brine solution, cut the tips off of the okra at the very end, and then you can or you cannot, depending upon whether you want to, make score lines around the top where your stem is. Go ahead and leave the stem on. Put it in the jar with a couple of cayenne peppers, maybe a couple other spices if you want to make things interesting, and then pour your brine in there and put your airlock on. Fun stuff. Makes the heat from the cayenne migrate over into the okra, and then it absorbs up into the seeds. So whenever you eat it, you've got this really nice, savory, uh, lacto-fermented okra, but then the seeds burst with this intense heat whenever you bite into them. It's awesome. It's no other way to you just have to do it. I can't really describe it adequately. All right. Yep, you can preserve meat by salting. Of course, you have to have an adequate supply of salt. All right. All right, let me get on down here. Happy Gardener's with us too. Kimber wants to know if any sunflowers count if she helps. But well, you kind of live here, so I don't know. All right, let me get back to our conversation here. Onions and daffodils and other stuff. Here we go. Once you begin diving into the world of edible roots that can be grown in the temperate zones, you'll encounter a bewildering spectrum of bulbs, corms, rhizomes, and tubers. These are all underground starch storage vegetables. Starch storage tissues used by plants to survive those winter months. And they make great food for humans, except for when they're toxic, of course. And that's why it's important to be able to tell the difference. And the good news is it isn't hard. See, both bulbs and corms have very similar appearance. You're like, what's a bulb? What's a corm? I don't understand. Well, they both have a similar appearance. They've got a fleshy underground structure that encloses the stem, and they'll have roots emerging from a region at the bottom, opposite where the stem comes out at the top. So you imagine a bulb that has this sort of cupped shape. The bottom is where the roots come out. The top is where that stem comes out for where the flower is going to be. A good example, of course, is the garlic bulb or the onion bulb, where you have that single flower that comes up and opens up. Well, garlic and onions, alliums, are all bulbs. All right. Corms will also have that stem coming up and roots coming out the bottom opposite of the stem. So if you don't know which one you've got here, is this a bulb or is this a corm? Go ahead and take a sharp knife, take your suspected bulb and cut into the mass of the bulb or corm, whichever it happens to be, cut on into it, and then open it up and have a look. If it has layers on the inside, then it's a bulb. And if it does not have layers, if it's just a solid mass all the way through, then it's a corm. Now, once you've made that distinction between whether what you're holding is a bulb or a corm, it becomes really, really, really easy because there's a very limited number of true bulbs out there in the world. And almost all of them are toxic to some degree or another, with one exception. And the one exception are members of the allium family. And members of the allium family are very, very easy to identify. Whenever you cut into that suspected bulb or corm, you should immediately notice that scent coming to you of allicin. Allicin is the chemical compound found in garlic and onions that give them the distinctive smell and, of course, the flavor. All right. If you're following along in the blog post, I put down a little bit about it, allicin being a thioester of sulfenic acid, put down the chemical formula of it. And don't worry about all of that, because all you need to do is look at that chemical formula that is C6H10OS2, and you realize, wow, most of this is very common elements: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. That's water. So carbon and water, things that you get from the air and the water cycle from the soil itself. If you have organic matter in the soil, you're going to get all that stuff. But the two sulfur atoms that are in that chemical formula at the end, that's something you're going to have to provide. Now, if you're interested in the topic of how to get sulfur into your soil in a natural way where you don't have to go and mine it from somewhere or buy it and import it, there is a certain amount of sulfur that you're probably going to be able to get from your subsoil, but your regular plants on the surface, your alliums in particular, aren't going to be able to get it. So you're going to need something to mine for that sulfur from your subsoil. We covered that in a previous blog post called Dynamic Accumulators, and there was a live stream that went along with that. I'll probably try to find a link and put it up here somewhere in post. So if you're watching on replay, you'll be able to find it. Anyway, let's keep on going. That smell that you get from an onion, from a chive, a leek, a shallot, All of those have that distinct allicin aroma, but if for some reason your sniffer isn't working right, you can tell by taste. All you have to do is take a bit of that material, bite, chew slightly, and spit it out. Now, if you do not get the flavor of onions or garlic whenever you do this, then you've got a bulb that is to some degree toxic. If you should happen to feel a sensation of heat and no onion flavor, then chances are it's not only toxic, but you're also slightly allergic to it, because your taste buds will give you that sensation of heat on food items that you have an allergy to. If you bite into something that ordinarily wouldn't be considered hot, but it tastes spicy to you, is most likely because you're experiencing an allergic reaction. So don't confuse an allergic reaction for suspected onion flavor. If you can't tell by smell and by flavor, just assume it's not good and don't cook with it, and you'll save yourself a lot of grief. Things like daffodils will be enough to make you nauseous. They'll give you the sweats. You'll have some stomach cramps, possibly some vomiting, but then you'll be okay. I mean, you're going to hate life for a little bit, but you'll be okay. If it's a hyacinth, which is another bulb, then you may not be okay. Unfortunately, there have been times of famine when people have resorted to digging up whatever was in the ground and eating it, and not being able to identify which bulbs were which. They go, well, maybe it's an onion, maybe it's not, but it's something, let's eat it. And people did die that way. People have suffered that way in the past. I don't want that to happen to anybody. So, of course, this is the reason why we're putting out this particular show. All right. So, incidentally, did I cover corms? Did I kind of skipped past corms, didn't I? Okay, so I'm going to backtrack in my show notes here. All right. So, fleshy underground structure encloses the stem, roots from the bottom, and the stem goes out the top. Both bulbs and corms have the structure. Bulbs have layers in them. Corms do not. They're a solid mass. That's how you know. There are a great number of edible corms like taro and water chestnut, but there's a number of poisonous ones as well, like crocus and gladiolus. Now, those you're going to find in flower gardens, typically dedicated flower gardens. Crocus you might recognize. And do I have a picture of a crocus that I could come in and put up here for you? I think I do. You guys do recognize what crocuses are, or know what crocuses are, right? You've seen them before? Let me see if I can. I might happen to have one. Do I have one? Yeah, there we go. So if you're not following along and reading on the blog and looking at the picture of the crocus, there's a picture of crocus there behind me, right? Now, crocus is a corm. You might think that it's a bulb because it looks similar, but whenever you cut into it, you discover that it's a solid mass on the inside. It doesn't have layers, but it is toxic. You don't want to eat crocuses. They're bad for you. The maybe lethal, but definitely are going to make you feel ill. But the interesting thing about the crocus is that little orange thread that I'm going to try to point at right up there. You see those little threads, 1, 2, 3 of them in the flower right there? Those little tiny threads are what's called saffron, and it's the most expensive spice on the planet. So if you get crocus and you plant them in the fall, the crocus corms are planted in the fall and they bloom in the spring. So we do have some. I don't know exactly how many right now, so I haven't listed them yet on our website. We do have the yellow daffodils because they're blooming right now, and I can do a count and go, okay, that's how many we've got. And I know that whenever I go to divide them come July or so, we're going to have enough that we can go ahead and start putting them out. Daffodils you want to have planted by say October or so. But we'll have those for sale. And there's a few uses for them. They're not edible, but you do have a certain number of permaculture uses for a daffodil bulb. And I'll talk more about those in depth later on as we approach that time. So anyway, example of corm right there that we have that most likely you're going to encounter in the garden, the crocus. Incidentally, $15 is it? What is it? $15 a gram? $15 a gram for saffron, that particular spice there. Daffodils, incidentally, I priced those too If you happen to want to grow a bunch of daffodils, maybe you want to keep that's what we'll talk about. You want to keep things like voles away from your trees. You plant the ring of daffodils around them. That's the reason why you see in all those old gardens, the trees got that little ring of daffodils around it. It's like, why in the world is the daffodils planted around the ring of the trees? Why did Grandma do that? Well, the reason Grandma did that was because voles and rats and other digging critters, maybe not necessarily the gophers, but a lot of them, whenever they're digging along and they come across that daffodil in the ground, they go, "Oh, I don't like that. It's doesn't taste good." When it's not good for us. It makes us nauseous. It's not good for the gopher either. And they go off and look for something else. So the vole goes off and looks for something else, and hopefully that means they don't chew at the bark of your young trees and kill off your trees. So that's the reason why you see all the daffodils. The narcissus is what they're technically called, as narcissus, growing around the trees. We'll have those available on the website come fall. Anyway, where was it? Oh, daffodils. The other thing you can do with daffodils, aside from protect your trees with them and have them look pretty and provide a source of nectar for early pollinators. For example, right now, we're in the very beginning of the second week of May. We do have some bees stirring from their wild habitats. We do have some solitary bees starting to come out because we've had some warm weather, and it would be nice for them to be able to get something to eat. And so these flowers that are out there provide the early pollinators with food to eat. So that's the other use for them. So the bulbs protect your trees from being attacked by voles, not completely, but they help a bit. The flowers provide something for the early pollinators to come and get, and also you can come along with your handy dandy scissors and snip the stems and trot them down to your local florist, who would probably not want to pay the shipping fees to have their cut narcissus brought to them when they can have locally sourced stems at the same price. Right now, they're going at about 30 cents a stem. So your typical clump has maybe about 20 bulbs in it. You get about 20 stems, 20 flowers over the course of the season. That's 20 times 30 cents. Is that $6? No, wait. 30 cents times 10. It's $3. $6 for 1 year's worth of cut flowers off of one clump of dahlias. It'd be $6. Naturally, if I were to sell you a bundle of 10 daylily bulbs for $10, then about 2 or 3 years you wind up making your money back on it if you are willing to cut and sell your flowers. All right. Hey, Vicky is saying columbine's an effective rabbit repellent. That's interesting. I know rosemary is something deer don't like either. Let's see. Hugo Holmes said, found some random daffodils on my property. Only been there a year. Leave them where they are for right now. Note where they are. Just maybe put a little marking flag or something down there. You can get those from the ranch supply house. Actually, I need to go over there tomorrow and get something, and I'll see if I can grab some flags too. If you have different colors, make sure you put a flag down to tell which color is which. That way, if you want to come back and specifically start designing your landscape with different colors, because that's fun, you can do that and you'll know which colors you have. And it's really easy to propagate. Just wait until July, late May, into July, and then dig them up, divide them up, and just make sure you get them. Either put them on peat moss in someplace nice and cool until the fall weather comes around, September or so, or however you want to do it. Just make sure you get them back on the ground by October. You could throw them in a bucket and just keep them in a bucket with a little bit of water if you wanted to. They don't mind. Yeah, I noticed that. Spoon with Sunshine is in here. Good evening, y'all. We got all the Texans in here tonight. It's a Texas invasion. I've got Texans in the spare bedroom right now, as a matter of fact. All right. Yeah, bumblebees are out. Happy Gardener says, my wife and I planted 1,000 daffodils for a flower garden this year. Not one around the fruit trees. Oh my goodness. Yeah, if you can put a ring of them, a nice good ring around the base, it will help keep those little critters from coming up and investigating. And then you can spread out and put other things down there too. Put in some garlic, put in some walking onions is a good one. I've got a video coming up here pretty soon. Maybe, I don't know, whenever I get done with it, I suppose, where I'm going around and I'm transplanting my walking onions and getting those ready. I was hoping to have enough to sell this spring, but drought hit me pretty hard, and I was a lazy bum during the middle of summer. There's no better way to put it. I just goofed off and didn't go out and didn't water and didn't do the things I should have, and so I don't have them. I'm just having to build them back up again for another year, apparently. But I was putting those out earlier, and that's one of the things that you can just scatter into your forest garden here and there. And since they propagate themselves so readily, I've made this observation during the video, and you'll see it whenever I start to dig them out. Whenever you plant one that's maybe about that big around, the walking onion, right? Whenever you plant it and it goes through the year, it top sets, makes little tiny baby onions. You can take those and separate those little top sets over and let them get started. But that first onion grows up and it gets big, and it can get to the point where it's maybe about as big around as the base of my thumb, like leek size, right? That much root that you can get. Chop it up, cook it like an onion if you want to, or if you let it stay on the ground, it will reproduce itself and calve off into 2 or 3 other onions about that big. And you just separate them out, move them apart, and repeat the process. So over time, if you get a few of these, you will eventually have all the onions you'll ever want. You don't have to worry about going and buying onions ever again. It's kind of nice, but not every nursery carries them because they're a little bit fiddly and they don't work exactly like every other plant that you work with. They're great for just randomly planting throughout your forest garden, and then you walk along and go, oh, wow, there's onion. You go grab one. There's dinner, right? It's part of dinner. Vicky says we've got some wild, maybe feral daffodils blooming on the hillsides. They're nice. And of course, even the wild ones, you can go and you can gather them. You can use them for the same purposes. Just make sure that you don't mistake them for something that you're going to eat. Of course, now that you know, you think you get that stem, and you bruise it and you smell and go, that doesn't smell like onion. And I go, well, maybe something wrong with my sense of smell. Let's taste it. And this time you're just working on the foliage, right? The stem's above ground. And just touch it to your tongue after you. No, it doesn't taste like onion. Well, chances are that's not onion. It's going to be something else. We have a lot of these little Star of Bethlehem that are coming up right now, and you'll see them show up in some of the videos. That looks like a little cluster of chives, maybe a little bit darker than chives are, but they have that same little tiny, thin, pencil-like leaves coming up straight up. But the Star of Bethlehem will put up a spike with flowers on it that'll open up, the little star-like spike of flowers. They're very pretty, and they're also very poisonous. But once again, it's one of those things that, like crocus, we have out really, really early in the spring because it's good for the pollinators. And actually, it's nice to have something colorful showing up in the garden, even if it is something that you can't actually eat. But now that you know how to identify what's edible and what's not, this is going to be easy. All right. Moving on. So we covered corms and how to tell the difference between an edible bulb and one that's not. See, that's the main part of it. Let's talk about some of the other storage root vegetables since we're here in this temperate zone. Hi, Kitty. Got Sergeant Kitty with me tonight. All right, here we go. Hailing from the South American Andes Mountains with an 8,000-year-long history of cultivation, the best known tuber on planet Earth today is, drumroll please, the potato. Like corms, tubers are revealed to be one entire mass when you cut into them. There aren't any layers. There's just the skin, and then there's the starchy mass. That's it. But unlike corms, tubers don't have a distinct region opposite the stem where the roots grow. Tubers just seem to put out their roots wherever they please, right? So you'll be happy to discover that there are just a whole host of edible tubers to be had, aside from the aforementioned spud, and many make for interesting additions to the garden for reasons well beyond their edible roots. The one I'm going to talk about now is dahlias. We're going to have a couple varieties of dahlia coming in that I'll be playing with this year. They won't show up in the catalog yet, but I'll be growing them, propagating them, and of course, taste testing these particular plants. I'm not going to put anything out there to tell you guys, go eat this, until I've had an opportunity to try it myself. Because I've discovered some things. There are some of those edible flowers that I just don't care for. I know nasturtiums are all the rage, but nah, I don't really care for the flavor. They're not what I think of as being a really um, palatable edible flower. They're edible, sure. They won't poison you, but the flavor is just not really all that great. So we're going to try out the dahlias. Some people say the root tubers are sweet. Some people say they have bitterness, and some people say it really depends upon the species and subspecies of dahlia you got. Some of them make great tubers. Some of them don't really make great tubers at all. And there's variations in calorie count and protein count depending upon which subspecies of dahlia you're growing. I ordered up 3 different varieties. We're going to try them all, and I'll be able to tell you after growing them a bit which ones are better eating than the others. And the ones that are better eating, of course, I will mention that when we do eventually add them to the catalog, because I'd love to be able to provide more edible flowers out there, just to the point where anywhere you go, wow, look, it's a beautiful flower garden. It's perennial. It takes care of itself for the most part. All we have to do is just tend it, dig up the plants, divide them periodically, replant them, and just spread the garden until it covers this entire planet. And then, hey, I think it'll be a nice place to live. So we have dahlias as one of those that usually you see in the ornamental garden, but the tubers are said to be sweet and crisp. Like I said, flower is edible too, if you can bring yourself to eat it, because they are gorgeous, and I mean gorgeous flowers. All right, the other one we talk about a lot, which is the daylily, Hemeracalis fulva, and that's another ornamental garden favorite with a long history of cultivation for tubers and this delicious flowers. I mean, after you've tasted a daylily flower, you're going to have a hard time justifying growing lettuce unless it's just like, I really need something to go on my salad until the daylilies come up and are available. It's that good. As far as the tubers go, my favorite way to prepare a daylily tuber thus far, after blanching it, is to chop it up fine and fry it up along with eggs in breakfast, kind of like you'd fry up hash browns. And it works just fine that way. Mary discovered that, hang on. We have an Amber Alert. Okay. And like all Amber Alerts, they fail to provide key essential information, like exactly where this event is supposed to be taking place, making it virtually useless. Well-intentioned, but virtually useless. All right. So apparently there's somebody that something is going on with. They didn't provide that information either. So, great. Where was I? Oh, yes. Mary discovered that the quantity of dietary fiber in daylily tubers, if you do not remove the skins, was a bit more than she required. In other words, it's a lot like having a little supplemental of Metamucil. It'll help you go to the bathroom. So if you do not need extra dietary fiber whenever you blanch your daylily tubers, just take a moment to give them a squeeze and strip the skins off of the tuber. They'll slip right off fairly easily. All right. Moving on here. Many tubers are toxic. Even parts of tubers that we eat on a regular basis can be hazardous. So you might be familiar with the common potato. Remember the spud that we all know about? Well, when the common potato is exposed to light, it begins to develop a compound called solanine. Now, solanine is where the genus Solanaceae, that's what the potato is from, gets its name. Solanaceae also include things like deadly nightshade and peppers and tomatoes and eggplants. All right. Yams from the genus Dioscorea have a high concentration of calcium oxalate, depending upon the variety. Some are worse and some are not so bad, but they all have concentrations of calcium oxalate underneath their skin. So whenever you're preparing your yams, it's prudent to peel them underwater to reduce the risk of contact dermatitis. You don't want to break out because the root vegetable you're in the midst of prepping up to serve to your family. Good news, of course, about calcium oxalate is whenever you cook it, it denatures the calcium oxalate, making it no longer hazardous, and then it just becomes a nice source of calcium for us. Let me see here. So there's no quick and easy identification trick for tubers, unfortunately. You have to look at them, look at the foliage whenever it's there to determine what the plant is, and then give you a positive idea of the plant. You'll know whether it's toxic or not. But can you imagine for one moment that knowledge, knowing that there's no easy, ready way that I can look at a tuber and go, I think this is a toxic tuber, or this one might be good to eat. There's no simple rule of thumb for this. And since there isn't, could you imagine a person being afraid of cooking and eating potatoes? Well, that's just silly, isn't it? Because we're so familiar with potatoes. And it's the same way with all these other tubers and corms and bulbs that are edible. Once we establish a certain degree of familiarity with them and we know what it is that we're planting, we're not going to make the silly mistake of going, well, I think this is an onion, and we wind up serving a hyacinth to our family, which is poisonous instead. It's not going to happen. Unless, of course, you don't take the time to familiarize yourself with these things. You get in an emergency situation. It's not the right time of year to observe the foliage, and you just start digging up roots and eating things at random. That's a good way to not have to worry about where your next meal is coming from for an entirely different reason. All right. So what else can we say about tubers? Tubers have eyes. I guess we could say tubers have eyes. Probably more accurately, it would be more accurate to say some tubers have eyes. Not all tubers do. Eyes are those buds that appear along the wall of the tuber that may become plant stems under the right conditions. You've probably seen your potatoes in the pantry starting to put out these little root-like things out of the little eye buds on the side of the potato. Well, that's what an eye is. Dahlias have them as well. But daylily tubers, although they are a tuber, they don't have eyes. So not all tubers have eyes, but only tubers have eyes. So we're going to say that part before moving on to our last root crop, which is rhizomes. And the reason I wanted to mention that is because rhizomes also have a portion that will produce a stem, but it's going to be very easy for you to tell the difference between a tuber and a rhizome because rhizomes come in segments. So if you see the plant growing with segments, there's a little band, a little growth band, and then there's more, another growth band, and more. And those growth bands, the segments, just like whenever you're preparing cuttings, when you have the little node coming off on the side, those segments are places where you can have either a root grow out or a stem grow out, depending upon what hormones are being expressed to that subterranean stem, which is what a rhizome basically is. It's like a fleshy underground stem, and depending upon the hormones it's getting will determine whether it's going to make roots or whether it's going to make stems, and it will make a combination of roots and stems. So you're going to see rhizomes grow out, and those roots and stems emerge right there at the junctions where those nodes are. So unlike the eyes that are just on the smooth flesh of a tuber, a rhizome is going to have that junction that your root or stem will grow out. But, yeah, something like that. All right. So commonly consumed rhizomes are ginger, turmeric root. You may have seen those in the grocery store. You may have purchased them, used them yourself. Not hard to recognize those little tiny segments that come along the root. And of course, that's where you get those little buds where your stem will shoot up or your roots will come out. But another rhizome that doesn't get quite as much attention, at least here in the West, but it is a very, very heavily consumed rhizome, is the canna root, which I've talked about before. Wanted to put up for sale this year, but lost a lot of due to the heavy drought and, of course, my stubborn refusal to employ the garden hose. There's a madness to my method. The madness is I want to make sure the stuff that I'm producing is hardy enough that it can survive droughts. So if I killed off some of the weaker stock, the stuff that I propagate going forward should be more resilient. So hopefully it'll have the desired effect. Might take me longer to get out to production, but hopefully it'll be a better product whenever we get there. All right. So the rhizome of the canna, once you've got it washed up, throw it in the pot, boil it for about 30 to 45 minutes, and then chill it so you can handle it. This will loosen up the tough outer skin and allow you to peel it. I've got videos on how to do it. I'll probably do more in the future because I do love cooking with this particular root. It is great for filling up the empty places inside, really high in calories, more calorie dense than potatoes even. Um, as far as your square footage of land needed to grow this particular root crop, you can get more calories than growing potatoes, and it's easier to grow. If you don't happen to need them, depending upon what growing zone you are in, like zone 7 or so and south, you can leave them in the ground. They'll survive the winter, and then you just dig them up whenever you get hungry. That's kind of a nice, convenient thing to have. Dig the root up whenever you get hungry, right? As opposed to I have to go through a lot of trouble to harvest all this stuff, bring it in, preserve it, keep it over the winter, make sure that I have it available, and then go and prepare it when it's time to eat. A lot of these things, if you're in an appropriate growing zone, you can leave in the ground and only harvest whenever you have need of them to eat. Also, whenever you harvest them, it's also a great chance to propagate and spread them around. So you harvest and replant at the same time. Fairly easy lifestyle, actually. So, once again, Canaceae, the canna lily, not a lily. It's called a lily, but it's not a true lily. They're harvested for their starch that's used to make the glass noodles popular in Southeast Asian cuisine. And they're high on my list of reliable, easy to grow calorie crops. The one thing that I will say about them that we discovered this past year is they need their water. So if you are experiencing drought, take time to get them some water. Otherwise, they won't produce for you. They have to have that water. All right. Shoo. We're about to call it quits. Before I take my leave, if you're following along, I wanted to redirect your attention back to those pictures that I showed you at the very beginning, with the one that's not behind me right now. Let me get this one behind me real quick. We've got this one here. All right. And the question that I had for you, do you think that these bulbs are poisonous? Let's see. Currently, we've got a 60% no. Is that the final answer? We got 15 votes in. 40% says yes, this one's poisonous. 60% says no. We'll give you another minute to look at that, and I'm going to go through chat just real quick and catch up with you guys. Jasper was saying used to be able to tell old homesteads in the middle of nowhere by the daffodils being there. By daffodils, sometimes by crocuses and other things like that. Things that you would only see in a planted like little cottage garden will show up. Yep. There's another use for daffodils. Incidentally, this is one of the uses that I use daylilies for because they grow into such a good thick clump that once they've grown together, you don't get much in the way of intrusive grass or anything else in there. So they fill that herbaceous perennial layer and the ground cover layer at the same time. I do put everything in buckets. It's like I get extra buckets, like let's throw something in a bucket. Oh, awkward humans with us. Not everybody's a Texan. Yeah, not everybody's a Texan. We got some folks from Arkansas. Somebody's lurking around here from Missouri. There's a fellow from Iowa here. Illinois. Sorry, not Iowa. Oh no, don't beat me. Please don't beat me. I think Florida was in the house earlier. Light snow in Wisconsin. Whew. There's a testimonial right there. I sent Jasper spread some walking onions. Was that last year or a year before? And they're doing great. Take it off, and yeah, they spread. It's hard to kill them. The only way you can really reliably kill them is to pull them up and eat them. If you pull them up and eat them and you don't propagate them, then you can kill them off. Otherwise, they'll surprise you. You may think they all died, and then the next year they just pop up everywhere. Happy Gardener saying, try not to put my onion and garlic anywhere near my daffodils. Generally a good idea. Of course, once again, with familiarity, you'll be able to obviously tell which one's an onion and which one's a daffodil, which one's a garlic. And that simple smell test, if you don't know, just go crush the crush that stem at the top and sniff it. If it doesn't smell like onion, chances are it's not an onion. Vicky was asking a question that she asked last week, and I thought I answered, but I may not have. Yes, I've got them planted. They haven't come up yet. I've got them planted. Happy gardeners use walking onion and cooking. Very, very strong. Yeah, they are. They're wonderful. They're strong, more strongly flavored than the regular onion bulb. So even though that little, maybe that big around onion doesn't look like a lot, it flavors really, really good. You don't really use the walking onions for bulk. Use them for the flavor. They'll get you all the onion flavor you want. See, you learn something new every day. Dahlia, Dahlia. Dahlia. Yep. And dahlias are edible. They have been harvested for food for a long, long time. It's just here in the West, we don't really think of them as being food items, like so many other wonderful things that are food items, and also flowers. And so, well, it's a pretty flower. You go to the flower. We've got the dahlias coming. I also have some aca coming, which is a form of oxalis with an edible tuber. We have wild growing oxalis, which is the little shamrock flower. We have plenty of those, but this one is a more specifically grown for the root. And then we've got yacon, which is another tuberous veggie from South America, where all the wonderful tuberous veggies come from, of course, right? We've got those coming this year. Not going to be in our catalog for a while yet. I'm going to experiment, see if I can grow them and propagate them. If I can grow them and propagate them here where things are so prone to extremes in between too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry, all of that going on at once. If I can do it, then chances are everybody else can too. So this is the way we do things. I try to kill plants. I get plants, I plant plants, I try to kill plants, either by neglect or by subjecting them to horrible conditions. And then the ones that survive, we propagate more of, and that's what winds up going out to the world, are the plants that I could not kill. And if I can't kill them, I'll bet you can't either. Because I'm pretty good at killing plants. I've got it down to a science. I can kill anything. If I work hard at it, I could kill any plant. I'm pretty sure. Mary's talking about hauling freight. She hauls a lot of potatoes, folks, and it's kind of interesting how they get moved around. Because you have like Idaho brand name potato, but they're not grown in Idaho. The seed is produced in Idaho, and then they send it to other places to grow, like in New Mexico. You wouldn't think that New Mexico is a place where potatoes are grown, but they grow a lot of potatoes out there in New Mexico. It all has to do with loose, well draining, in this case, sandy soils, and having a long, cool season. Here in Northeast Oklahoma, we don't really have a long, cool season. We sometimes have one in fall, but not always, so it's not reliable. And then springtime, we have freezing weather, and then it quickly gets to the 80s. And once it gets to 85 and up, potatoes don't want to produce anymore. So spring's not a great time to grow potatoes here in Oklahoma. And fall is hit and miss. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And then we have cycles. Like when I was a kid, we had long, cool seasons. We also had deep snowdrifts, and we don't have deep snowdrifts anymore. So, well, it'll come back around. It always does. But it may be another 40 or 50 years before the weather here is like it was when I was a kid. Happy Gardener is saying, are all daylily edible? This is a good question. And all hemerocallis are edible. We'll put it that way. Because daylily is a common name. I don't want to say, yes, all daylilies are edible. Because somebody might be out there with an actual true lily that grows from a bulb and says, that's a daylily. And you go, oh, okay, it must be edible. No. The common name daylily, when it applies to the genus hemerocallis, are all edible. And As long as you're getting hemerocallis and you know that you're getting hemerocallis, you're fine. Eat them. All the hemerocallis are edible. The Stella d'Oro version is edible. There are a couple other little sports of daylily hemerocallis that are edible. They're not all hemerocallis fulva. There are a couple of subspecies of hemerocallis. Those are all edible. So all members of this genus, hemerocallis, edible, and common name is daylily. So just make sure you're not confusing some other plant with hemerocallis, and you're fine. Anyway. Wendy, did you guys get that Amber Alert too? I hate it when they do that. They send out this alert. They don't tell me where. So I was like, okay, that's great. Where is this? Is this Broken Bow? I'm not going to be anywhere near that. All right. Kimber says her phone isn't even getting those alerts. Oh, yeah, because I don't know how to turn them off, man. That's pretty much it. Somebody's going to have to show me how to do it, probably. Or I can fiddle around with it for a while and figure it out. Okay. Vicky says pokeberry cobbler is more effective than Carter's little liver pills. What? I'm not sure. I hear conflicting stories. Okay, so presumably you can eat a certain number of pokeberries and have a positive effect, but pokeberries are poisonous. Yeah, it's kind of like everything else. The only difference between medicine and poison is dosage sometimes. Too much caffeine? Too much caffeine is not good for you. A little bit of caffeine might be just what you need, depending. Caffeine has a synergistic effect with a lot of other substances. So a little caffeine along with your aspirin might make it a more effective vasodilator. Vasodilator, blood thinner. That's it. All right, here we go. Mary says she thinks somebody's stealing old people in Texas. Stray Kitten has a good question here. What's the difference between yams and sweet potatoes? Yams are members of the species Dioscorea, and sweet potatoes are members of the species Epomia, like the I'm probably mispronouncing that, like the bindweed or moonflower or what's the one I'm thinking of? Mary, you know this one. We've got it all over the place. It strangles everything. It's a flower. It's a vine. I can't remember the name of this. We've got some of those growing around here. Anyway, difference between yams and sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are Epomia. Yams are Dioscorea. They are both tubers. And I'll remember the flower in a moment. It's put in my mind. It's very common for some reason. I just can't remember it off the top of my head. Jasper says, "Don't eat the poke seed." Yeah, I'm a little bit leery about that myself. Supposedly it has medicinal benefits, but here's the thing: the supposed medicinal benefits of poke seed can be obtained with other less hazardous herbs. So why not just use the less hazardous herbs in the first place? Unless, of course, this is the only thing you've got, then you can use it. I guess I would rather use the berries for maybe a dye or something. They're pretty good at that. Sasspress is asking, does it matter what kind of sunflowers we plant for the competition? They must be Helianthus genus. Although perennial sunflowers will also work, they may not necessarily work as well. For example, Tittonia diversifolia, the Mexican sunflower, is a perfectly great plant to plant for entirely other reasons than to use for bioremediation. Jerusalem artichokes also you could grow. Um, I probably wouldn't want to grow them for bioremediation, if that makes sense. Although I think Jerusalem artichokes are actually a helianthus. Let's go take a look real quick here. I can look it up real fast on PFAF, the Plants for a Future database. Let's look at Jerusalem artichoke. Hey, wow, I can just type that in there. It says Jerusalem artichoke. It even corrects my bad spelling. It is a helianthus. It's Helianthus tuberosus. So Jerusalem artichokes are a sunflower. They're a perennial sunflower. And I would not want to use those for bioremediation. I would want to put those in after we're done with bioremediation and grow them for the edible tubers. Right? I didn't even mention those. Like some people have a reaction to Jerusalem artichoke as well. They'll have a little gastric distress. Some people have gastric distress with daylilies. Some people have gastric distress eating fava beans. A small percentage of the population just doesn't manufacture the necessary enzymes to properly digest these particular fairly common foods that most of us can digest. So try one out, taste it. If you have a little, give it a day, try another one. If you get the again, then maybe it's not for you. If the next time you eat it, you don't get the because now you have the necessary gut biome to digest it, then great. You're with the other 99.7% of the world population that can eat most of the stuff. But we have to put that little caution out there because you don't want to have that, oh no, I have cramps. Did I eat the wrong thing? Well, no, chances are you're just having that first time eating the Jerusalem artichoke effect, or that first time trying out the daylily effect, or the first time eating a fava bean effect. All right. So that was the answer. What kind of sunflowers? Any kind. I'm planting black oil sunflowers. You can plant mammoth sunflowers if you want to, or any other ordinary seed producing sunflower annual that you can harvest the stock of at the end of the growing season. Because the way we count score, the way you qualify to get in is do a video showing I'm planting my sunflowers. Talk about why you plant sunflowers. After you've got that done, whenever it's time to harvest, once the stalks are dry, the seed head is done, harvest the stock and then count the stalks. Do a video where you count the stalks, how many you have, and then whoever has the most, even if you did not grow them on your own land, yes, you can go plant them in center medians, highways, and everything else. Go guerrilla plant and then harvest them. That's fine. Try not to steal other people's. I mean, I imagine there might be something going on, but hopefully there's enough of them out there that it's not going to be a problem. Harvest them, do a video showing how many stalks you've got, and whoever's got the most stalks by the close of the contest is going to win a gift card for $100 from yours truly. Because I want to see sunflowers across America. That's what I want to see. I want to see sunflowers. I want to see so many sunflowers that people say, why are there so many sunflowers? What's going on with the sunflowers? And when somebody asks, we can say, hey, look, we may not be able to keep our leaders from going to war. We may not be able to stop them from starting a nuclear war, but if they do start one, we've got sunflowers in the ground and we're ready to bounce back from it, despite them. That's what it's for. And maybe they'll notice that and maybe they'll go, we should back off a little bit. The people are getting worried about our policies. I don't expect that, but hey, at least we did something. All right. Stealing old people. All right. Moonsprout says, just spread cannas all over her property. Awesomeness. Cannas are great. I love my cannas. And they come in different varieties too. The ones that I've had the most luck with are the regular Ashira Indian shot or the Canna indica puria, which just have these nice big fat tubers on them. And they're not great for edible flowers. The flowers are edible, but I'd rather leave those for the hummingbirds and the butterflies. Give them something to eat, and then just eat the tubers. Other varieties of canna produce large flowers, which actually are pretty good in a salad. They're not sweet the way that the daylily flower is, but they're no worse than eating lettuce, and they do have a better nutrient profile than lettuce, so you may as well eat the flowers. The big showy flowers on cannas don't produce viable seed. the little tiny red ribbon-like, and I think some of the yellow ribbon-like, like the Louisiana canna, the canna glauca or glauca. Those ones will produce viable seed. So I'm going to see if I can get some seed off of the little yellow cannas that we've got. We only have a couple. So I'll see if I can get seed from those and see if I can germinate it and see if I get something weird and different because I like to have variety in different flowers, different types of things growing. Often when I have a different variety of the same type of flower, that different variety is going to have a different bloom time, maybe offset by a day or a week from the rest of them. And having that offset by a day or a week, if I'm harvesting flowers that I'm going to eat, means that I just have this continuous supply of food coming in. This one grows, it gets done. This one comes on. This one grows, it gets done. This one comes on. Maybe this one comes back for a second blooming later on. Who knows? But during the course of the year, if I have a variety to choose from, I can just keep on going and picking up whatever's fresh right now. And variety being the spice of life, it keeps things interesting, and it's all good stuff. Let's see. Florida has a lot of silver alerts, I would imagine. Moon Sprout once again talking about cannas overwintered fine in 8B. I discovered that the regular Canna indica or Achira as they call it, the Indian shot, will overwinter in 7A as well without any difficulty. Although I do still pull some up and pack them in peat moss every year just to be on the safe side, because this is the Great Plains, and one of these days the Arctic Circle may be in our backyard, and that might be enough to do the trick. Who knows? But I've seen huge clumps of them growing in people's yards that have just metastasized over the decades and have taken over everything, and they've just crowded everything out. The vast amount of food that people have in their backyards, and they don't even realize that they've got enough to feed a small army. Yep. Ken is also providing an answer to sweet potatoes, mentioning also that yams run more starchy, and sweet potatoes would run more naturally sweet. The taste of a yam, an actual yam, once you've got that oxalate taken care of, you got it chopped up, you cook it up, it has a taste that is very similar to a potato. So it'd be just like you'd boil the potato. Whereas a sweet potato has a little bit of that sweetness in it. It's always going to have that sweetness. And it has a little bit different mineral profile as well. If you're living in more northern climates or more southern climates, if you're watching from the southern hemisphere, say zone 8 and northwards, or zone 8 and southwards if you're in the southern hemisphere, there's a Dioscorea, I believe it's called cinnamon vine, is the common name. But that particular one is capable of surviving up here in these more cool climates. The only problem with it is it produces a very, very long, like taproot structure that goes down, and you have to dig that entire thing up. So unless you've got really, really easy to work, soft, loamy soil, like you've been growing a food forest for a decade or so, or you've got some other way of being able to get to that tuber once it's grown, maybe not the best thing. We've got other things that we can grow here that will work fine too. But hey, if you like yams and you want to grow them this far north, you can, or that far south, you can. Let's see. Vicky said, I've been chastised for buying seed potatoes. I need to plant them for a fall crop this year because they're not any priority for spring planting. It all depends. You get a lot of little microclimates depending upon which holler you're in the Ozarks. In some places you can get away with having that nice long cool spring and you can grow potatoes. In other places you got to wait. It depends. You are most welcome. Stray Kids bought a clearance kit that said yams, but the ingredients listed sweet potatoes, not yams. That's right. Yeah, the grocery store lies to you. They put the word yam on that can. It does not contain yams. It contains sweet potatoes. Yeah, you would have to go to a specialty grocery store to find canned yams. And chances are you wouldn't find them canned. You'd find them whole, depending upon how big. They get huge. You just buy a block of yam, take it home. There you go. Uh, Ken's trying 3 varieties of sweet potatoes. That's nice. I think we're just doing 2 this year. Just the Murasaki purple and the good old fashioned Beauregard. Everybody grows Beauregard. I grow potato slips and sell them, but come on, it's so easy to make your own. It would be just cheating. I am going to try to grow aka. I've got some ordered, and I'm going to put it in the ground and give it a shot this year, and we will find out if I can grow aka or not. White skin, purple flesh. That's Stokes. Is that Stokes? No, I think Stokes is purple skin, purple flesh, isn't it? Yeah, Stokes is the purple. Which one's the white purple? Let's see. I can see where Chad is. Lazy. Okay, Happy Gardener's Growing says can't get much size, but love the lime potato taste. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, all the little tubers I've seen for aka have been little tiny ones. But as I discovered with growing the daylilies, even the fact that those little tubers on the daylily are only about the size of my pinky. Yeah, well, some of them about the size of the tip of my middle finger, about that big. They add up. If you dig up an area that's 1 square foot and you've got 300 grams of root out of there at 166 calories per 100 grams, that's a fairly decent amount of food out of 1 little square foot. And the fact that after you get done harvesting that, you can spread it around, in the case of the daylily anyway, that's pretty cool. Morning Glory. Thank you, Ken. That's the name of that one particular vine was slipping. I was like, which one? We have it's a weed. It's and I keep on pulling it out every time I see it. I was like, I don't want these in here anymore. And I guess the trauma caused my mind to blank. Yes, morning glories are the ipomea or ipomea. Yep. And yams are Dioscorea. It's the genus. So ipomea is the sweet potato. Yam is Dioscorea. And let's see, the cypress vine with the little tiny red flowers and the fern-like leaves growing on the vine that'll pop up in the spring. We'll have those around. Those are also the Ipomea genus, but I don't think I'd want to eat them. Suzanne is saying Lilium are not. They're not edible. Not edible. Not edible. They're not edible, people. They're not edible. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll here. Let me see if I can find it. Where you at? All right, we've got, are the bulbs in the thumbnail poisonous? 65% said no, they are not poisonous. All right, here's the big reveal, guys. The thumbnail picture, those are narcissus or daffodil. And they are poisonous. If you ate them, you would experience dizziness, nausea, stomach cramps, possibly mild hallucinations as you vomit uncontrollably and just have generally a bad time. They won't kill you, but you won't enjoy the experience. The second picture that I had in the let me go ahead and put this up on screen here. The second picture that I showed, which I'll put in frame for you right there, that picture is onions. Onions, can you believe it? That's an onion. And this is the funny thing, because you look at I guess if you're looking at that picture on the right-hand side, you can see a little bit of that green foliage, the stem, and the very tip of it looks flat, right? which would make you think maybe that isn't an onion. But the very tips can be. The whole stem of the plant is hollow on an onion. So this is one of the ways if you want to know the difference between your alliums, what's an onion and what's a garlic. Garlic have flat stems and onions have hollow stems, round stems. But the very tips of them can be flat, like you see in that picture there. So this is one of the reasons why it threw foraging professionals off, and they weren't able to make a 100% accurate diagnosis just by looking at a picture of that particular bulb, because they can look so similar that if you can't make that test where you take a sniff or take a slight taste to see if you can taste allium, if you can't taste allium, if you can't detect the presence of allicin in a bulb, it's poisonous. I don't know how poisonous it is, but it's poisonous. Don't eat it. All right. So we've got some people out there growing potatoes from seed. This is something I've never tried. It'd be kind of cool to do. People are telling me which one I was forgetting. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, as I catch up to chat. Judy's with us. Hello, Judy. All right. Ta-da. So as for saying poke root's a powerful antibiotic. Poke shallot's good. Yeah, high in vitamin A. Joe is here, late but present. Sneaking in at the last minute, Joe. Did you get the opportunity to vote in the poll? I'm on empty. I don't know why I keep on trying to sip coffee here. Yep, Jerusalem artichokes occasionally get called fartichokes because they do cause a reaction to some people. Not everybody has this reaction, but it's actually a fairly common one where people will have extra gas after having Jerusalem artichokes. And there's ways that you can prepare them that will reduce that effect. But a lot of us have lots of gas after eating beans too. All right, Stray Kitten was asking one. I think we covered that one. And Sassafras says, yeah, you want to be able to eat the root of the Jerusalem artichoke, and if it's been soaking up heavy metals, then it's not good. So use your annuals and then harvest them root and all, and discard them in one centralized location where you can contain whatever toxins are in the soil. They'll decompose down there, and then you can just seal that up and not interact with that soil for a few thousand years, and then everything will be fine. Biggest problem with Jerusalem artichoke is their high content of inulin, which is a potent prebiotic. Also, dahlias have a large quantity of inulin as well. It's essentially a starch that our bodies can't digest. And depending upon how your body responds to that starch that you cannot digest will determine whether or not you get gas or not. Yeah, you don't want to eat all the junk that the plant pulls up out of the soil. Judy's saying that Jerusalem artichokes, I've never tried these, but she says that they remind her of water chestnuts. So I have tried water chestnuts, and I grow water chestnuts as well. So that's pretty cool. I like them. I love the heck out of water chestnuts in a stir fry. All right, yeah. Sassafras has got a good point here. What if my Jerusalem artichoke are planted in soil that may be contaminated? So your Jerusalem artichoke is going to leave that tuber in the ground. It's going to pull out the heavy metals. A certain amount are going to go up into the stalks, right? Discard the stalks. You get rid of the heavy metals that are in the stalks. There's still going to be some of the tubers. So go ahead and dig up your tubers and divide them like you would ordinarily. And then put the same number back in the ground that you would ordinarily. If you're not dividing to extra areas, you can take those tubers and also your excess tubers and discard them. Try to replant your new growth, not the old growth, but the new growth. Incidentally, a lot of rhizomes are like this, and a lot of the bulbs are like this. The old one will finish its growth, create the new ones, and then die off and rot down. So in the case of cannas, gingers, and stuff like that, the original chunk of root is not good for the next year. Once it's sent its flowers up and it's set off additional growth segments off to the side, it's done, and it'll wind up decaying. In any case, grow your fresh growth from your tubers, and then check them if you've got the ability to run a Geiger counter over them. If once again your tubers are still radiated, separate it out, take your new growth, plant your new growth, discard the old stuff until you get your soil right again. But it shouldn't take too long to reach a point where your soil is safe from radioactive fallout. Knock on wood. And Ken's mentioning that inulin does have beneficial effects about the balance that out. Yeah, inulin is great for diabetics, particularly. Different kind of intake. Look up the live stream and of course the blog article on plant names, right? Indica is not always the stuff that you smoke. Vicky is hoping the cannas will survive the bitter cold. I hope they did too. Chances are they did. Hopefully you got some inside too, just in case. Because yeah, that can happen. Ken mentioned inulin. Is that also in Yukon and Himika? I am not certain. I will find out whenever I start covering Yukon. I don't have any intentions to grow Himika right now. Judy is saying she lost her cannas 2 winters ago. Okay, so and there's a bug crawling across my camera. Get off of there. What are you doing? Who let you in here? All right. Mary says she's got her doors closed and is parked. What? 1 year, Wisconsin got to -50. Oh my gosh. Whew. She's saying stay south of I-80. I guess it's getting bad up there, huh? And Sassafras is also north of it. It says today's historic low temp. You guys got low temps up there? Back in 96, living in a VW here in Illinois. How the defroster works, but not well enough to heat the metal box. Those metal boxes are hard to heat up in the first place. It's just like they're refrigeration units. They just suck all the heat right out of you. It's the metal body, right? It conducts the heat away. Let's see. See, Mary admits to it. The morning glory, yeah, her fault. She did it. It was her. It was back whenever she was living at her mom's house, which is the house next door. It's her mother's house. This is 2 houses side by side. The one next door is her mom's, and this one is hers. But when she was living at her mom's, she was planting flowers, and she thought morning glories are cool. She planted them around, and they grew, and they just got everywhere. And now everywhere you go, we've got morning glories. Epomia genus, but not good for their tasty sweet roots, unfortunately. Heterodox is saying late to party, Sambucus budded today. I've got a Sambucus nigra, whatever. You know what I mean? The black elderberry right there in the front yard that has had leaves on it all throughout this winter. It's had green on it all winter long. Stay green. That's interesting. Okay, so Jennings is saying Murasaki, Okinawa, and Beauregard. Yeah, I've got the Murasaki and Beauregard, but no Okinawan. Oh, Okinawan is the white skin, purple flesh, right? That's what it is. And Stokes is purple flesh, purple skin, and Murasaki is purple skin, white flesh. So you can tell the difference between our sweet potatoes. Whole bunch of them. Let's see. Joe's saying the bulbs behind you, upper part looks similar to taro, aka dashin or malanga root. That would be also, yeah, taro, elephant ear, but no, these ones are those ones are daffodil or narcissus, and they're poisonous. Not deadly poisonous, but make you sick poisonous. We can grow some taro or dashin or here elephant ears are also called. They don't grow really well, and we have to bring them in the winters and stuff like that. But we can grow them. Sassafras Red is going to grow sweet potatoes with the corn ear to see how it works. So the sweet potatoes will make a really good ground cover underneath your corn, unless the corn shades it all out, which is always a possibility. Really depends upon how densely you plant. But since sweet potatoes don't have the little grasping tendrils the way curcubits do, they won't grab a hold of your corn and drag it down to the ground if they can. So they'll just stick to the ground. You can make sweet potato vines climb, but you have to train them to climb. Whereas squashes and pumpkins will climb on their own. Let's see. Sassafras said the purple ones are really good. I had one. I don't know what happened to it. I don't think it survived. Oh, okay. So, yeah. I pulled a fast one on you this time, huh? I showed you one that's not edible. Still useful in the garden, just one that you don't eat. Most of the things that I'm going to show you are edible. This one is not. Let's see. We've got irises that aren't edible. We've got daffodils that aren't edible. We've got the Star of Bethlehem that aren't edible. Also, a few crocus that aren't edible. So we do have some that aren't edible. Pardon me. Vicky's asking if there are varieties of water lilies that are edible. Most are, actually. They're not true lilies either. The one that is typically called blue lotus, which is marketed for its medicinal properties in certain circles, said to have a nice calming effect, is an edible water lily. Unfortunately, it doesn't grow where we are. You have to be, I think, zone 10 or so to grow that one. But the regular old white American water lily is also edible and is used for exactly the same medicinal purposes, anti-anxiety and sleep aid, just like valerian root and passion fruit. And at some point, we are going to have all three growing here. I don't know what happened to my valerian. I've tried a few times to get it established. Maybe it just doesn't want to grow for me. But we'll see about passion flower and water lily. We should have some anti-spasmodic, anti-anxiety herbs around here. In any case, Happy Gardner saying, once you get Jerusalem artichokes started, they're hard to get rid of. I love hearing that about certain plants. I like plants that are hard to kill. My goal is to have available for sale on our website. Of course, we have an online plant nursery. My goal is to have nothing but a horde of plants that are just almost impossible to kill, because that's reliability and stability and security. Pardon me. Well, guys, I've been here for about an hour and a half. I know I'm not all the way. Oh, I'm almost all the way down here because I see Sassafras Red talking about blue lotus. Yeah, good medicine for sleeping nerves. The good news is, although it's not quite as potent as the blue lotus water lily, the American white water lily is also effective at being a sleep aid and settling the nerves. So I need to do something about the cat that's behind me that's getting ready to knock over my green screen. I'm going to take off, guys. Thank you for joining me tonight. I hope the video was informative or entertaining. If it was, you know what to do. I'm going to catch you next time. But until now, let me flub my line. Until then, get out there and get growing, guys. I'll catch you next time. Kitty, what is it? Come here.